Hello and welcome to the Read to Know podcast, where the goal is to actually remember what you read so then you can better apply it to your life. On this podcast, we go through a book one chapter at a time, and then we actually practice remembering what we've read. So if you want to follow along, we're currently working our way through Bob Goff's book, Dream Big. I'm Zach Brown, and my friend Chris Yarber is joining me to help discuss and break down this book. Also, if you're on Apple Podcasts, it would be huge if you left a rating and review for us. It would help out a ton. If you're not on Apple Podcasts, no worries. Just send this to a friend who might be interested. Anyway, thanks again for listening and enjoy the conversation. Have you ever been in a life or death situation?
Like a physical life or death situation? Because I have been in, I've been in some instances where I thought I was going to die, but it's probably just because I'm being too dramatic, not because I'm literally going to die.
Right. I mean, it could be either.
Okay.
But, was there a time specifically that you were like, oh my gosh, like I'm fearful for my life right now?
There was a time when my brother and I, my brother's 2 years older than me, so a little bit older, but there was a time where we were horse playing in the pool and we were wrestling around, and he kept dunking me underwater because we were kind of like tackling each other and stuff. He kept dunking me underwater, and I remember, like, I'm sure that my face turned red, but I really could not breathe each time he raised me up and then dunked me back down. I couldn't breathe in between; it was too fast, and so I remember shoving him off and taking a deep breath in and then breathing out and coughing some and stuff like that. But that wasn't necessarily like I wasn't close to drowning or anything. Do you have any life or death situations you want to talk about?
I don't. That's why I asked you.
Okay.
But the reason I bring it up is because Bob tells us a story where he legitimately thought he was going to die.
Right.
In this chapter, he talks about that, and so I thought I'd ask because I thought it was a funny way to start off.
Well, also, I thought it was funny in this chapter, which we're in chapter 23 today. I thought it was funny that one of his ambitions is to save a life. Mm-hmm. That's he writes in this chapter that's one of his ambitions.
Right, and I think he even mentioned that a few chapters ago, didn't he? In his ambitions list.
Maybe he did. My bad.
I think he might have.
Okay, yeah, it must have been part of that long list that we read.
Right, yeah. So, yeah, he first off, he runs into a life or death situation surfing on this coast during a hurricane coming through.
He thought that was a good idea.
And some guy literally climbed down this cliff to go get him out of the water and save him. Mm-hmm. And then he was driving by years later. He was on motorcycles, he said. Driving by years later riding on motorcycles. And there was a guy who was standing there admiring the sunset, and he wasn't paying attention. He slipped off the ledge. And fell. And they climbed, and Bob climbed down there.
Yeah.
With the other people that he was with, climbed down there and tried to save him.
Right.
The fall ended up taking his life, but, he tried. And there's a couple crazy stories there.
There are.
And the reason he brings those up in this chapter is because he makes the point to say that it is worth trying even if you fail.
Right.
And he said, in that situation with that guy, when he tried to save his life, I would have rather failed trying to save him than failed watching.
Yeah, right. Yeah, this chapter is all about making a move. And the reason why this chapter is entitled 1034 to 1035 is because he tells the story of the Wright brothers when they took flight for the first time, which they took flight at 10:35, the minute before, of course, being 10:34. And of course, we're not going to live our life in those 10:35 moments. But for a lot of us, we may be in that 10:34 where this may be the time to move, but we're not moving. And there are several different things he talks about in this chapter that may be blocking us from making that move. Procrastination is one of those. I'm not a huge procrastinator. I like to get things done so I don't have to do it later. That's
Chris,
a number 3 for sure.
I know you. You're definitely not a procrastinator.
I'm not.
I look at you and I'm like, you already got that done too? I look over and you've done like 20 things by the time it's taken me to get ready to start doing something.
But I always want to say that I'm a procrastinator because I feel like cool people are procrastinators. You know what I mean? They're procrastinators, and I just want to fit in. That's that's part of my personality. But procrastination can get in the way of us making that move towards our ambition. Another one was the self-sabotage, which sometimes now I can do that. There are certain things, especially when it comes to personal things, like if there's some personal financial things that I need to take care of, or even if it's like running an errand, just these, like, I don't find great joy in doing small things that need to be done, but I need to check them off the list. I'd rather go do something else. And self-sabotage, instead of moving forward in your ambition, it's you saying, instead of making that call, I'm just going to chill on the couch. Or instead of going to the marketplace, he says in here, you go to a movie or something like that.
Yeah. A
little bit different than procrastination. And then another one is the naysayers and the haters, which before this, we were talking about how I struggle with the thought of failure, like trying out an ambition and failing. But he also talks about in this book telling other people your ambitions and taking genuine interest in them, as we've talked about in the past. But I would rather fail and no one else know about it than fail and fail in front of other people. Because when I fail in front of other people and I begin to share my ambitions with others, then if I don't complete those, I feel like I failed them somehow.
Right. Yeah.
Which, yeah, interesting.
Right. It's like they can hold your feet to the fire now.
Right.
And you're like I have to pull through on this, which
Right.
is a good motivator, but it also, it stings a little bit more when you don't make that.
Yeah.
But definitely what I think was that in the same section, the naysayers and the haters. There, he also talks about that even people who know you and have known you for years, friend group that you've maybe been a part of for years, or coworkers and things, like they have a set, everyone has kind of a place where you fit in their own head.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so if you're chasing ambitions and you're following something that you're passionate about and it kind of breaks the mold that they have for you in your head, sometimes people can react negatively, even not in a conscious way or not in an intentional way, but can react negatively to that because you're breaking out of the mold that they set for you. And so that can even be an obstacle or a reason to not push ahead as well.
Right. Yeah. I think people also, because I've done this towards other people, as I see people move forward in their ambitions and their dreams, we don't do this on purpose, but the sooner we recognize this and make a change, I think the better. But sometimes we can grow jealous of other people, and that can make us haters.
Yep.
We can grow jealous of other people, maybe because their life is moving in a direction and we wish that we would make that move that we need to make. But he says in here that for you to move forward in your ambitions, the stars don't all have to be aligned. Which before we started recording, you even said that's me, because sometimes I wait for all the stars to align before making a move, but we don't have to wait for that to move forward in our ambitions. Right.
Yeah. For sure. That's, for me, that's definitely a tendency that I have. Like I said, I think in the last chapter, even, I will plan and I want to strategize and I want to get all the pieces of the puzzle together before I move forward. But there's a time where that becomes counterproductive. Obviously it's good to prepare, but at a certain point it starts becoming counterintuitive, counter positive.
That's that too.
However
you want to say it. Counterintuitive, counter positive.
After a certain point, it starts to become ROI negative than ROI positive.
Right.
In over prepping.
Yes.
So in that sense, there is a time. Yeah, you have to take the step forward, and like Bob says here, that minute of 10:34 before the Wright brothers took off, they had no idea what was going to happen. You know what I mean? And that's the thing. When we're looking down the tunnel that is the rest of our lives, we don't know how it's going to turn out. You know what I mean? And we don't know that if it's going to be a successful flight or if it's not.
Right.
But that shouldn't stop us from acting. That shouldn't stop us from doing and taking action.
Right.
And doing that, the kind of the mantra that he has behind that is I would rather fail trying than fail watching.
Right. Yeah, I think there's a couple things that we can expect as he lays out here. Is failure is one of those, and resistance is one of those, which is why he goes over, that procrastination, and like the naysayers and haters and stuff. So those are two things that we can expect, although we don't know what it's going to look like after we take flight. We can't expect those two things. So maybe there's a little comfort in knowing that.
Yeah, for sure. Let's go ahead and open up the book and take a look at some of our favorite quotes.
Yeah, again, a short chapter as we're used to in this book. He starts off this chapter by talking about a couple of weird houses that we're not going to read through the whole illustration, but he talks about a couple different weird houses, including a friend of his who has been building a house for like 8 years, but still hasn't finished it. And so he uses that illustration to say you build and prepare some more, but never really move into your ambition. And that's where some of us may be after we recognize our ambition. We prepare, but we're not actually moving into it. He says, is everything going to fall magically into place? Of course not. It's going to take some detail work, so we can't overlook that. Preparation is important. Detail work is important. Research is important. But he says, don't try to spend all your time getting the stars to align. Start making moves, because some things will line up and some things just won't.
I like what he says here, because he says some things will line up when we take action, and other times it won't. But the thing is, if you keep making moves, he says, there's just something about action that makes the world want to straighten the path and flatten the road beneath your feet so it's easier to travel.
Right.
And I kind of like that thought. I mean, I think we think that we have to figure it all out before we start, but if we go ahead and start, sometimes that action is what actually helps us figure the rest of it out. Right. You know what I mean? Once we start moving, we can more quickly adjust and figure out those few things that we may have been missing before we started.
Right. Yeah. And I think this is where, we really have to take into account sometimes we're going to have to open some doors ourselves. Not all doors are going to be open for us necessarily. I think sometimes, especially in Christian communities like you and I are in, a door is shut on us and we think it's God saying no. But really, sometimes I think we say no quicker than God does.
Yeah.
And so sometimes our no gets in the way of what God has prepared and planned for us. And so this is where, like earlier, he said in the book, okay, if the door closes, then you need to find a window that's open. And so sometimes we need to take measures and make moves that in the moment may seem a little bit extreme or something that we may not have done before. But as he says here, who knows, that may make the traveling easier down the road. Don't just quit and give up on that, but keep moving forward.
Right. But yeah, I think that's a good point to make. And it's funny. I think a lot of times as Christians, we do say that something happens in life, and we're thinking, okay, that that was just God. But sometimes life is just life. You know what I mean? Sometimes that's just life, and things happen. You know what I mean? Things don't always go our way, and just because it may be abrupt or it may be something negative doesn't mean it's necessarily a sign from God, shutting the door. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's just life. Life happens, what I mean? And like he says earlier in the book, go see if you can open up a window in the back. You know what I mean? You don't
Right.
have to, just because the door's shut doesn't mean that you have to turn around and walk away.
Mm-hmm. Make a way. Yeah.
Yeah. And so going into what we mentioned earlier, but the things that he talks about can get in our way of taking action is procrastination and lethargy, self-sabotage, and naysayers and haters.
I love how he says in this naysayer and haters section, he says, this is the most common resistance you'll encounter. So just know that it's not necessarily self-sabotage and procrastination, because those are things that we can take action on and fix. However, something that's a little bit more out of our control, kind of in our indirect control, is naysayers and haters. This is the most common type of resistance.
Yeah. And he says where this stems from. It says it stems from, sometimes people get really antsy when we see others hurtling towards their dreams, parents, friends, coworkers, even spouses. Anyone who feels threatened by your new adventure may do things that feel like they're shutting you down, but that's not their intent. They probably don't even know that they're doing it.
Right.
You're picking up on reverberations of your successes ricocheting off their own lives, and I think that's true a lot. I think that's true. I don't really have anything else to add to that, but I think that's true.
It's a beautiful, it's a beautiful quote. It sure is. He also says in here that a beautiful ambition is more contagious than the worst cold. And I read that to say, if you start sharing your ambitions with people and they start to develop some of this naysaying and kind of, maybe start acting a little weird towards you because now you're working outside of that normal sphere that you worked inside of that friendship or that family. If you see some resistance in that way, I also want to encourage people not to stop sharing their ambition, because to some it may turn them off at first, but you never know when they may take another look at that and look at your life, especially as you keep moving forward in that ambition, as you continue to make progress, because they may see it as a beautiful thing as you see it, and that may motivate them to take action, which I think is one of the most beautiful products of following your ambition, following through with that, is that it may inspire other people to start doing that for themselves, and could really start a chain reaction.
Right, yeah, because that's what he's saying here, that people who react negatively to that is some kind, it stems from something of that they're not happy with how their own life is going. And through that, it's not in a goal to try and be better than the other person. Hey, I'm working towards things that actually mean something and you're not. But you can actually, still talking about it and bringing it up can actually help spur them on, to doing that in their own life. And I think that, that's what we all should be going after,
Right.
And so to help someone else get there through, your own life can be beneficial to other people.
Yeah. And to be honest, Bob says this as well in this chapter, there's just not a lot of people doing that, sadly. He says here, after his story about the Orville brothers, or the Wright brothers, with Orville and Wilbur, he says that I meet so many people in my travels, good people with great ideas, but they never take those ideas out of the hangar. And I mean, if you think about how many different people, if I just think about my friend group and my family that I know, the few people that I know, there's so many different people around us, and because of those differences, I can just imagine how, because of their personalities and how God created them to be, what kind of awesome ideas they would have. And so there are a lot of people around us with a lot of good ideas, probably even better ideas than what we have ourselves. But the difference between those who follow their ambitions and make moves in those and those who don't is that they don't take that idea out of the hangar. So you never really see that come to life. So even Bob says himself, there's a lot of people who are stuck in that.
Right. Yeah. And the only way to break through that, he says, that 1 minute is a small amount of time, but it can represent a huge shift in your life. It just requires a willingness to fail.
Right.
And that's what we're all afraid of to some degree.
Right.
Some less than others, but it requires a willingness to fail. And if we can be okay with that, then we can move forward and take this next step, no matter what it looks like and whether we come out on top or not.
Yeah, he says a willingness to fail, not a willingness to start. I would say that most people are pretty self-motivated to start. But if you're willing to fail, then that means you can move past any of these levels of resistance. Because if you're willing to fail, which failure and hangups will come along the way, then starting's no problem. So I love how he puts that in there. As you said earlier, again, he goes into another story kind of at the end pages here. Earlier you mentioned that he says, I'd rather fail trying than fail watching. So he sticks to that failure themes a little bit. He says also that our actions will not be perfect, often not even close. Whatever our ambition is, to keep at it. Will it work? Who knows? Fail trying, don't fail watching.
Right. For me, that was the best quote of this chapter. Definitely one that I need to maybe put in front of myself a little bit more often. Maybe put it as my phone background screen, or put it up on the wall somewhere. Write it down so I can come back to that.
Yeah.
I'd rather fail trying than fail watching.
Yeah. See it every single day. Keeps you moving forward, and really gets you in that headspace that, if you're willing to fail, then you're really willing to try anything. So I don't think any idea is too big for you to move forward in. So
yeah. Another quote here that I want to bring out, he talks about how he met with one of the family members of the guy who fell off the cliff and passed away. And he says here, he took a picture of he had a picture of the sunset because that's what they were looking at, the sunset there, and he took a frame, he printed it out and put it in a frame and brought that picture to the lady that he was meeting. And he said instead of talking about the mistake that he had made, they talked about the beauty that he saw. And how good of an example is that for us even too, when other people or even ourselves, would try something and we fail, we make a mistake, we fail at this thing that we were trying to work towards or do. We can still appreciate the attempt.
Yes.
You know what I mean? We don't have to bask in the negativity of the mistakes. You know what I mean? But we can appreciate what that person or what you were trying to go after.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because there's a bigger thing behind it, not just the mistake, but what the purpose of why you were even going after it in the first place. And you can appreciate that.
Yeah, that's true. I think when we do think about something, a huge shift in our life, and we think about, okay, am I going to fail at this? We always talk about the negative with that instead of looking at this as an opportunity to, okay, we do fail and we may not achieve what we thought or the end product is. It does not look at all what we were imagining at first, but really in that difficulty, you have an opportunity to learn and to see something beautiful out of that and to learn something from that may prepare you for that next step towards a certain ambition that you're going to make. So I think you're right. We have to look at the beauty of some of these things, especially in our failures, because if not, we'll kill ourselves mentally and emotionally trying to think of what else we could have done and live with guilt and shame the rest of our life. Because Bob felt really guilty for, not being able to save that guy's life. They tried and tried and tried, and by the time that the ambulance got there, his life had passed. So he could have lived the rest of his life with that guilt and that shame, but he decided to show the beauty in that.
Right. Yeah. And when it comes to our ambitions, I think we take it way too seriously. And he just says our actions will not be perfect. Often they're not even close.
Right.
Whatever your ambition is, keep at it. Will it work? Who knows? But fail trying, don't fail watching.
Exactly.
And he says once you get your ambitions in your sights, no amount of failure will keep you from trying again. So once we get over this mental hurdle, basically we're unstoppable. Once you get over that and you can do that over and over and over and over again, there's nothing that will stop you from moving towards that thing that you have set in your sights. Exactly. But you have to get over that mental hurdle.
Right. Yeah. And you have to take action, because your ambitions, as he says kind of here at the beginning, you have to take flight. There's no way, he says, your ambition can take flight without you taking action. So if we don't take action, if we don't move forward, then they're not going to go anywhere. We won't see the beauty in that. And so he says you're only about a minute away from seeing what's next.
Yep.
So
exactly. And that's how he ends the chapter there.
Yeah.
That was a good chapter.
It was.
That's one that I definitely need to hear.
Me
Probably
too.
need to go back. I'll re-listen to this podcast.
Yep. I would.
It's so weird listening to yourself. I really don't. I don't do it. Most of these, I actually haven't gone back and even listened. Once I export them, upload them, I'm like, all right, done.
I listened to the first couple minutes of it just to hear your editing skills and see how it all sounds, and sometimes what it looks like on YouTube and stuff like that. But I can't listen to my voice.
Yeah. Well, I hope you guys don't mind listening to us, because we definitely don't like listening to us.
We do not.
Anyway, if you guys had any thoughts on this chapter and you want to join the conversation, feel free to reach out to us at readtoknowpod on all social platforms. You can also send us an email, readtoknowpod@gmail.com. We'd love to hear what you'd have to say about this chapter.
Exactly.
About 10:34 to 10:35, and that minute, that makes all the difference.
It does.
Also, if you have been enjoying listening along, we'd love it if you gave us a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts. It would help a ton, help us push this podcast to new listeners so more people can listen and get value from what we're talking about. If you leave a review, feel free to send us an email of the review, take a screenshot, send it to us, and we'll read it. We'll talk about it. We'd love to know that your thoughts on the podcast. So
yeah, I'm also going to say this is just kind of throwing this out there, but I would also love for anyone who's listening to send us an email. At that email you mentioned, if they take something from this book or the last book that we did in the podcast, and not only to share their thoughts on the chapter itself, but also what actions you are taking. Because not only are we reading to remember, but we're also reading to do as well. And so if there's been an idea in this book or in the last book that we've done chapter by chapter, send us what you've done about it, because we would love to know that people out there are taking action through the values that we're learning.
That's a great point. Have you quit anything like we talked about a couple of days ago? Did you read that and you find out, you know what, I do have to quit this.
I do have a couple things I need to quit.
So yeah, we'd love to know. So anyway, thanks guys for listening. We appreciate it. And we'll see you tomorrow for chapter 24.